Thank you all for coming. I'm calling the meeting to order at 6:07 p.m. And we are going to get started. Thank you all for coming. I like to see a lot of engagement and new people. So the mayor's not here today. She had a place that she had to be, so she asked me to step in whenever she cannot be here, and I'm glad to do it sometimes. So our first inspirational reading for this today is going to come from Councilman Albert.
Thank you. So this isn't so much a reading as it's going to be a story. So I've been hearing a lot of buzzwords about leadership, and one of the fresher ones, at least to my ears, has been servant leadership, and I've really struggled with what exactly is servant leadership. And it took me a while to figure out the reason I was struggling with it is because that's what I do. It's just what comes natural to me. I don't know that there's really any other way to lead. And the example that I want to give you is that I didn't get anything accomplished at work today after 12 o'clock. Not a damn thing, not one thing. And that's because today is Boss's Day. And my staff, I have an amazing staff, and they orchestrated games, get to know me things. They had prizes, they brought cake, they brought food, and we all sat around and we talked about how to do our jobs and how to do our jobs better and the things that we want to do. But we spent 4 hours today, and while I say I didn't get anything accomplished, I didn't get any of my paperwork done. I got a lot accomplished. I sat and talked to all of my entire staff. They got to know me better. I got to know them better. And I know that they're going to come to work doing better things. And in my career in working, I learned that when you treat people right and you treat people fairly and you treat them honestly, they won't only work for you, but they'll produce more. And not because they have to, but because they want to. And you, as leaders, we shouldn't have to think about that. Shouldn't that just be the way that we are if you're in that position? That's the way you want to be treated. That's the way I want to be treated. So isn't that the way you should treat the people that work for you and the communities that we work in? You want people to care about you. You want your staff to care about your community. You want them to want to do things. And I really struggled with what servant leadership was because that's what I do. And so my thought for today is as leaders in your workplace or leaders in the city or in your churches or the PTA or your schools, think about that. How may I be of service to you today should be your mantra, because we all are in this together.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jason, for reminding us of that. Can we stand for the pledges, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now the Texas flag. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. And now we're going to go into public and citizens' comments. And I just want to remind everybody that we have a 3-minute limit. We, as a council board, cannot engage, so we're going to hear your comments, put it into public record. And in some instances, we will direct staff to get back with you if it's something that they can help you deal with, but we don't engage. Just so you know, it's not because we're rude, it's because that's the way the law is written. So I would like to start with George White at 10515 Mary Lane in Manvel. If you'd like to come speak, please. Yes, go ahead. And just have something to pass on? Okay. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, council members, I'm here not as a rep of anybody, just a concerned citizen. Businesses, large and small, churches and charities are the amenities of a civilization. I suggest they would be encouraged in Manvel. Manvel is not well served when the welcome mat is jerked out from under their feet in what is perceived as a needlessly aggressive and antagonistic act. The Texas Food Establishment Rules, TFER, and the Manvel City Ordinance is a city code. Both are very clear to those that take the time to research them. I remind you that these rules and codes apply to establishments, not just to the people and activities in them. TFER Section 437-007 Nonprofit organizations exempt. A county or public health district may not require a nonprofit organization to obtain a permit. From the City Code 33-1, state regulations adopted. The city adopts by reference the most current version of the TFER promulgated by the Texas Department of State Health Services. The TFER shall be considered incorporated herein by reference for all purposes. The state and city do not have jurisdiction over the facilities, people, and activities regarding food in the nonprofit 5013C. Those doors appear closed to you. I'm here to speak against the abuse of law being perpetrated by your new hire city code enforcement officer, who it appears has a vendetta against charities and churches. Charities and churches in Manvel, nothing is for sale in either of those. They're not restaurants, and the TFER and the city code clearly recognizes and defines that, as the document I provided shows. The enforcement officer has turned a deaf ear to that point and insists that she has jurisdiction. It is said, give a person a hammer and suddenly to them everything is a nail. The document I gave you shows the new hire enforcement officer in a demanding intrusion into charity and church operations has been operating under color of law and exceeding the jurisdiction of the city to regulate or require permitting of nonprofit charities and churches as per the TFAR. Nonprofit food banks are only possible because of a devoted and dependable cadre of volunteers who are, on distribution day, frequently aided by volunteers for the day from various local sources. Without those volunteers, the food banks would have to close. What would that mean to this community? It would mean that without volunteers, over 600 needy families at present would be facing loss of resource in a Bidenomics in which the number of families has doubled in the last 2 years. When this was carefully explained to the enforcement officer, her response was reported to be, well, that's just the way it is. 600 plus needy and sometimes desperate families in Manvel deserve better than a bully with a badge. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White. The next speaker I have here listed is Garrett Knox at 4835 Patterson Road.
A little speech I'm going to read for y'all. I'm going to try and do it fast to get in my 3 minutes here.
Thank you.
So, hi, my name is Garrett Knox. I have been a resident of Manvel for 20 years, my entire life. I'm speaking today to bring attention to some of the ongoing issues with your hired staff. For instance, we had a new code enforcement officer show up last year, and he stated that he was new. He told my grandfather that our business off of 1128 would need to be closed because, quote, you cannot have more than one business at the same location. That officer has disappeared. I assume that he left or he was fired or moved on, found another job. We haven't seen him again. 3 weeks ago, we had another encounter with a new code enforcement officer. I drove past my commercial property on 1128 and saw my political signs had been removed from the fence. I called the police department and I asked them to be returned. I knew the city had something to do with it. That's why I called them. Several of these signs had actually been hung by the candidates themselves because I'm involved in politics and I know these individuals. So someone on the staff stole the signs of the county judge, the county district clerk, and the drainage commissioner for this area. Magically, my signs reappeared on the fence, bent and rewired after I made that call. One of your city hires came onto my property and snipped my signs off of my fence. And I don't know if you call it trespassing or theft, I don't know, but I called and I actually spoke to the gentleman that did it, and he admitted to doing it to me on the phone. His excuse was that the signs were blowing in the wind and they were going to blow out in traffic and kill somebody, which is BS. I'm sorry. It's ridiculous. They were wired on the fence by the candidates themselves, and then I see them the next day and they're all bent and rewired. It was just because he got caught that he decided to go put them back up. I don't really know what the deal was with that. Anyways, it's a slap in the face that the elected officials who are hiring these staff have allowed them to trespass onto our tax-paying family's property. And just mind you, my family has been here for 4 generations. We were some of the original Italians that founded this town, and so it's a slap in the face to be walked all over by city staff. 2 weeks ago, we had a similar encounter with another new code enforcement officer. I told her, this is the same day, I told her that my grandfather was on his deathbed. The conversation continued for some time, and I sat and listened to a litany of things I didn't really need to hear. She made the same claim that you aren't allowed to have more than one business at the same location. I responded with, the fact that we have been there for 50-plus years, probably 60-plus years. And her response was, we get that a lot, but it doesn't matter what happened before our tenure. If the code enforcement, quote, gets that a lot, then this means that they have been making the rounds and doing the same speech with other older businesses. It isn't just us, because she said to me, we get that a lot, when I said that we had been there for so long. Anyways, my grandfather passed away that same day, and I really did not enjoy spending the better portion of my day discussing the validity of my family's business with the code enforcement officer. Our business has happened to have been a part of Manvel for 50-plus years, longer than probably some of you have been alive, and longer than probably some of you have lived in the city, for sure. And as I stand here tonight, I try to tell myself that the city council is not, hell-bent on running the businesses out of this town, but look at our city. The hires are causing strife with businesses. We just heard about one here a minute ago, and I've heard from businesses and churches complaining about this nonsense as well. So your hires came onto my property and took something that belonged to me, and it's ridiculous. They're putting pressure on other businesses. And so I just am asking that you get a grip on your staff and reel them in, because it is getting out of hand, and people really are not going to put up with this. And so I personally know several of you, including the mayor, and despite being a productive member of society and a lifelong resident of Manvel, I have also given back to the community. I am on this city's event board, which I've volunteered a lot of my free time to put events together for this town. And so it's just a slap in the face is what it is. And so if you hear anything from my speech, hear this. I am very disappointed that your staff has prioritized policing our longtime businesses during these difficult times, and people will not stand for it.
Thank you, Garrett. Our next speaker we have is Miranda Gonzalez with Keating Toyota. Do you want to come up and speak? And she's speaking about food tents and food trucks on site. Wait.
All right. Hello, council members. Hello, I'm Miranda Gonzalez representing Keating Toyota, located on 288 and Highway 6 right here in Manvel, Texas. I'm here today to speak about the issues we have had recently with your code enforcement officer and temporary food establishment guidelines. We have recently asked to have on-site food vendors on our property to include tents and food trucks. I'm here to discuss the lack of consistency and communication amongst the fire marshal and code enforcement. We do not have an issue following the rules. It is an issue with the unwelcoming way code enforcement is speaking to our food vendors when they call the city and their deliverance of policy. When the vendors ask questions on how to get their tent up to par, code enforcement informs them that if one item is off, she'll shut them down instead of offering positive instruction or a warning of some sort. The constant discouragement is unsettling for incoming potential small businesses and pushes them to do business with Iowa Colony, Alvin, and Pearland. We are also receiving different answers from code enforcement and the fire marshal. Example, after being denied to use their already purchased ABC fire extinguishers at their tent, I asked code enforcement officer if Keating Toyota can purchase the K-class fire extinguishers to keep on site for our visiting vendors to utilize, and never received an answer. I asked what weight, 5-pound or 10-pound, never received an answer. I did send an email to code enforcement informing them that both of the food vendors backed out of the car meet last weekend, and was told, if that's the route you want to take, we understand. We've also been instructed to use milk crates to store propane tanks and fire extinguishers while in use. This is not stated in the temporary food establishment guidelines, nor the fire marshal's office investigation packet. I would like to say we appreciate Police Chief for answering our emails to the best of his ability. He's the only one that took the time out to answer any questions. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Dan Davis at 6818 Powell. Do you want to speak on signs?
Okay, Good evening, council and city staff. I was sitting there and listening to the conversation that y'all had about signs and coming into the meeting tonight, right through the agenda, right through the changes to the sign ordinance, and had some of the same questions and thoughts that Councilmember Albert had, especially during the conversation, because the intent that was expressed during the workshop was not backed up by the written text. Because as I would read it, just to put this into perspective for y'all, and I'm glad that you're considering these changes. My perspective comes from my experience being a former political candidate and as a licensed realtor. During the campaign that I ran this past spring, I had 250 political signs out throughout the city of Manvel, just into the city limits alone. The way that the ordinance reads, I would have to apply for a permit for each and every individual sign that would require a site plan for where that sign's going, would require who's going to be installing that sign, so I'd have to figure out which of my 30 volunteers installed each and every sign. And what if it's not the volunteer installing the sign? What if it's the property owner that I'm giving the sign to and then they're putting it in? So there's this litany of documentation that I would need to provide for each of the signs that would have cost my political campaign $25,000 just to put signs up in the city of Manvel if a permit would be needed for each and every sign, which, as I read it, that's the way that I read it. Now, maybe I'm incorrect in reading it that way, but if so, as somebody that's pretty astute with reading city ordinances, I think that's an area that you guys could have it more clear. You have realtors that are sitting in the audience. You have business owners that are sitting in the audience. We want to see the city of Manvel be pro-people, be pro-businesses, not to have proactive code enforcement, but collaborative code enforcement. Let's find out how we can all work together for the betterment of Manvel, because unfortunately what's happening is you have two sides that are being pitted against each other. And that does not serve our history well, and that does not set up our city for a successful future. So I appreciate the recommendations, the feedback, the openness from staff regarding the signs, but just make sure that what you do, you're putting the people first. Thank you.
And just to, the experience for the collaboration, if there's anybody else that'd like to speak, you can raise your hand and I'll call on you and you're welcome to come up, even if you didn't fill out a form. Is there anybody else? Oh. Yes, please. If you come and say your name and your address in the city, please. Thank you.
My name's Noelia Benavides, and I live at 6723 Davy Crockett here in Manvel. Thank you. I also came here because I am a realtor, so I just wanted clarification. I know that we will be waiting upon the 53, let me get my glasses, 53-4, where that was my question, except as provided in section 5310. And since I know we're going to be getting clarity. But you know what? I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad I'm here, and I'm glad I was able to hear all this. I love my city. I love Manvel. And I've always believed that when we elect people and we hire people, is for always to look for the best of our city and of our citizens. And as I sit here and I look at you all sign, and all you have to do is turn and look at it, Manvel, city on the rise. Are we really rising, guys, when we're putting a stumbling block for every business, every church? Are we really rising? Is that really the intent of the city of Manvel? I love it here. This is a beautiful city, and I would like for it to see it grow, but it's impossible as a citizen, not just my profession, but as a citizen, to see that we ourselves, we the hired people, we the elected people, are putting stumbling blocks in our businesses. Not only that, justice and faith was in our logo. So my question is, are the signs issue really because the signs are an effect, or are we a money-hungry city? Because I have signs in many other cities in commercial lots, and I have never had to pay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Noelia. Is there anybody else that would like to speak on any other issue? Thank you very much for all who came up. I'm going to close the comment section at 26? Thanks so much. And so we're going to move on to the city manager's update.
Mayor Pro Tem and council members, I have a couple of items for you. One are the COVID numbers that we have, get from the Brazoria County website. It's odd because one of the things that the county has done is they've moved it from their homepage into the Public Health Department's webpage. So it's kind of an oddity. First time that they've done that since they started keeping track of it. From the last council meeting on the 19th, we had 57 confirmed cases. Now we have 9, so down 48. We have 2 probable cases. That's down 13 from the previous council meeting. We have 95 recovered cases. That's, or I'm sorry, that's up 95 from the last council meeting. A total of 7,471 recovered people. Since the last council meeting, we have had one more person pass away from COVID-related illnesses, a total of 50 since back in June.
7,000 in Manvel,
7,471 recovered cases in Manvel.
so nearly everybody in the city.
Almost everybody has had it, according to the Brazoria County website, yes. Total number of cases is 7,532 in the city of Manvel. At the last council meeting, I mentioned that the municipal court employees are helping coordinate a trunk or treat on October the 28th. The police department and the Manvel Police Association are also putting on, or participating in 2 other trunk and treats on Halloween, Monday, October the 31st, from 6 to 8. One of those is in Rodeo Palms, and the other one is actually in Lakeland. So on Friday here at City Hall, and then there's 2 other ones, like I said, in Lakeland and in Rodeo Palms on Halloween from 6 to 8 p.m. So there's a couple of other items or other things that the citizens can go to that the Police Association and the Police Department are helping. So that's what I have for you today.
Kyle, is there any reason why, I'm just asking, that you're not going to do Delbella Lakes or Water Estates?
I believe that's actually the HOAs or the subdivisions are actually putting those on, and we're participating in them.
Okay, so y'all are just going to.
We're not coordinating, and we're just having somebody there.
Okay. So, I want to move on to the consent agenda here. And after looking it over, can I get a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda, please?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
All those in favor? All those opposed? It passes, is it 7-0? Oh, 6?
6, yeah.
6-1. Eek. 6-0. Okay, moving on to the regular agenda. Number 1, consideration and possible action to approve a subdivision variance request seeking to vary Chapter 62, Section 62-111, additional streets requirements, and Section 62-113 sidewalks for an approximate 4.9997 acre tract of land located at 3927 Shamrock Lane. The subject site bouts the southernmost property along the eastern side of Shamrock Lane and authorize the mayor to execute the development agreement.
We actually have Joe's Abraham,
Oh.
who's our city planner.
Thank you, Jose.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. As you just read, this is a subdivision variance request from section 62-111 and 62-113. The subject site is located at 3927 Shamrock Lane, and Shamrock, you have Bailey Avenue, Shamrock. This is on the eastern side of Shamrock, and it abuts the southernmost property on Shamrock Lane. The property was illegally subdivided by the previous owner. The current owner is intending to combine all the illegally subdivided lots and build a home there. The current property owners is therefore required to go through the platting process, which triggers the requirement of 62-111, which is to construct 1/2 of all perimeter roads as concrete curb and gutter. And in combining with the other section, there would be a need for a sidewalk in accordance with the city's design criteria manual and major thoroughfare plan. And that's the reason why the applicant is requesting for this variance. With respect to the criteria that we have in section 62-5, staff finds, number 1, there are special circumstances affecting the subject site based on its location, Number one, the site is in our ETJ, and it is currently along an unimproved right-of-way owned by the Brazoria County. And it already provides access to several residential development on both sides of the right-of-way. Number two, generally, the strict enforcement of the requirement will not deprive the applicant of a substantial property right. However, it increases the scope of work for the project. However, when we consider that some of the neighboring properties along the street were recently developed without the need for this requirement, strict enforcement of this requirement would appear to be unequitable. So, number three, by granting this variance, we do not see any detrimental effect on public welfare or injurious to other public owners, property owners, or property rights of other individuals in the vicinity. This is primarily because by granting the variance, we are not changing the existing situation in any shape or form. Staff did reach out to Brazoria County Engineering as well as the Manvel Volunteer Fire Department, and they've provided their letters of no objection to the request. So based on the analysis, staff is recommending approval of this variance request with two conditions as listed in the proposed development agreement. Number one, the subdivision variance will expire upon the change of use from one single-family residential detached structure, and the property cannot be further subdivided. We have the property owners here tonight. If you have any questions of the applicant, they'll be able to answer those, and I'll be able to answer any questions that you may have for the staff.
So we're adding a condition that the property can't be subdivided forever? Because that seems pretty harsh to say that if I sign this agreement, I can't ever subdivide 5 acres.
So that condition is put with the intent that if subdivision is considered, the variance request is reconsidered depending on what situation.
And I will agree that that's usually the intent, not the way it's worded this time. This is worded differently. This is worded that says you cannot subdivide.
We could change that wording to where the intent is just as Joe's mentioned.
I would be more comfortable making that change to what we have done in the past, because I get that we're saying it, this goes away if you try to subdivide or whatever, but the way it's written, if we pass this, says, sign this now and you will never subdivide this land.
I could see how it could go either way, but we can make that clear. We can change that in that agreement.
Thank you.
I understand that, because that means when he sells it, that he can never do that, so. Normally, it's if somebody is going to subdivide it after they have it, that it goes away. So, I have a question about this picture. So the road is improved up for concrete, and then this is just a road, but it's gravel or something?
Yes, I believe that's what it is.
So, and which is why we got the letters to say that it can get emergency services, because there is something there for them to actually get on.
It's also, it's a county road.
Yeah, and
It's not a
county.
city road. It's in the
Okay,
ETJ.
and so the county will take care of it.
Right.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other discussion? Well, does anybody want to make a motion to approve?
With a
With
modification. of
the
one
modification that,
condition. The agreement goes away if it's subdivided.
correct. As Jason, that it's not forever and ever.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve as recommended with the change to the variance goes away if it's subdivided, not a final no subdivision.
May I get a second?
I'll second that motion.
All those in favor? All those opposed? Item number 2, approve the second and final reading of ordinance 2022-0-28, an ordinance of the city of Manvel providing for the de-annexation of a plus or minus 11.8 acre triangular area of land located, sorry,
That's
no?
on the consent agenda.
Oh,
It's
I'm
actually
sorry.
the next page.
I apologize. Ignore that.
You've already approved that.
Oh, I already did that. So, Item 2, forgive me. Consideration and possible action to approve resolution 2022-R-16, a resolution of the City of Manvel, Texas, adopting a revised design criteria manual containing subdivision improvement standards for all development within the city or its extraterritorial jurisdiction pursuant to authority contained in Chapter 62 Subdivision Ordinance of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Manvel, Texas, Chapter 212 of the Texas Local Government Code, and other provisions of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Manvel as amended or to be amended, and containing other matters on the subject.
Yes. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. So it is our I guess, what has become an annual review of our design criteria manual. This would be the 14th revision or the 15th overall edition, if you will, in 15 years since I actually started helping the city in 2008. So every year, you know, there's always something that we can improve upon, and this year is no exception. We've got just 7 items this year that we're recommending either adding or modifying, and I can go through those with you if you'd like. The first one is probably a belt and suspenders approach. We're adding some verbiage to page 7 and page 64. I know we've got some PD&Z members in the audience, and they'll appreciate that we just had this conversation yet again last Monday for developments, just to make sure that if you're in a MUD, make sure that you have capacity for the plat that's coming in, of course, right? And we specified it for the MUD because if it's a city project, then obviously we're going to check to make sure that that's there. Just as a course of business, we do that anyway. We keep a running tally. So the verbiage specifically says, for all projects located within a MUD, a water and sewer utility availability summary table shall be provided within every plan and plat submittal. The table will include a summary of currently platted lots and corresponding connections, along with reserve connections and planned future connections. It will also include the current capacity of the water and wastewater facilities, including plants, lift stations, et cetera, within the MUD. So most of the MUDs are on board with that already. They keep track of them and present that at our request, but not all of them do. So again, belt and suspenders, it's in there now. The second modification is on page 15, and that's just some slopes for our wastewater lines. I noticed that, or actually Kyle noticed that there was one thing that didn't make it into the summary sheet, but it is in the red line version of the DCM that you have. So some of the bigger lines, the 21-inch, the 27-inch, and also the 30-inch lines. We've never had a 27 or 30-inch line, but while Valencia is working on the design of those, they referenced reviewed back into our master wastewater plan, which starts talking about those bigger sewer lines and what TCEQ's minimum grades are. So we're just bringing those to where they're all consistent. Page 19, again, this is as a matter of sort of business. People are already doing this, but we just want to make sure that it's spelled out in there, because it seems like with our click to enter that allows the police station and also our public works guys to get into any of the lift stations, water plants, wastewater plants. We get them to do that, but a lot of times there's pushback. Well, where does it say that I have to do that? Okay, thank you for bringing that to our attention. So now it's specifically in lift stations as well. Page 28, some water plant site development parameters. All of those things are already contemplated when we talk about lift stations and wastewater plants, but we're adding them just to be specific to our water plants as well, now that we're actually getting new water plants. Also that controlled access gate requirement to that one as well. Backflow prevention, that one we noticed right after we adopted the DCM last year, just a little tweak where we were trying to have the verbiage inside the design criteria manual, and then there's a separate city code. So we don't want, in case the city code gets updated, we don't want to cause any confusion. So we're just going to reference everybody to section 71.7 of the city code when it comes to backflow prevention. And then let's see, number 6. So the sidewalk requirements. So when it comes to sidewalks, what we will typically do is look at the roadway. If it's a road that's in our major thoroughfare plan, our master thoroughfare plan, and look at what the profile is supposed to be. If it's like a Pollard or a Manvel Parkway, some of the bigger roads, they have very specific sidewalk requirements built into the thoroughfare plan. It might be a 12-foot, it might be a bike lane, it might be, so all of that's been contemplated. So that's usually where we catch it. For better or worse, there was verbiage in there that said sidewalks are required along all curb and gutter streets. And some people took that to mean, okay, so then I don't have to put a sidewalk on an open ditch road. Not necessarily. That wasn't the intent. So look, we're just removing that. We'll look back and see what the thoroughfare plans shows. If we can fit a sidewalk, like Starbucks is a great example. Let's see, Bighorn. We've got some other. We've been having a lot of pre-development meetings here lately, just to make sure, even though we're on Highway 6 or wherever, even though there might be some open ditches, we still need the sidewalks to get from one business to the next. And then the last one, probably kind of burying the lead here. The last one is probably the biggest one. Brazoria County has updated their drainage criteria for the first time in a long time, and they have captured the Atlas 14, which we've probably heard of that before. That they've captured those rainfall intensities. We're ready to do that, so that way we'll be consistent with Brazoria County, CNR3, BDD4, and BDD5. All 5 entities, if you will, are adopting those same intensities. It didn't change ours too much because we just updated ours a few years ago and no one else updated them then. So they had a much bigger change to make because they had 20 years worth of intensities to catch up. Ours is only about 5 years old. So I think that's kind of hitting the highlights. There are a couple little, spelling errors and stuff like that we fixed as well, but I didn't mention those in the summary sheet.
I have a comment on the Atlas 14. I've heard the same thing from all the drainage districts and chatting with them about that. So we're not with them on that, or we're just off a little bit? And what things are we off on concerning drainage? Because I know that's important.
Yeah, so this is specifically, it has to do with the rainfall intensity. So how intense, how fast, how much rain falls here is completely different than El Paso or Conroe, for that matter. It's different. And so these are regional numbers that they've calculated. And like I said, we're a couple years behind. So if we adopt this tonight, those intensity numbers, then we'll be consistent across with all the drainage districts and the county. So yeah, we got just a pinch behind. They literally just updated theirs this summer. The county did, and I was real proud of the drainage districts. They followed in suit with that.
One other comment you may want to make about the difference between the 500-year flood event areas and the 100, at least in Manvel.
Yeah, and we don't have a whole lot of 500-year floodplain, but when the Atlas 14 stuff first came out, gosh, it was shortly after Harvey. If you remember, the city of Houston and Harris County, they were, okay, from now on, we're going to hold developers to the 500-year floodplain. We're going to make we're going to use that as our base flood elevation. And that caused a lot of concern, a lot of panic, and because that was a huge jump in Harris County and the city of Houston. Here, it doesn't really impact us, and I'm not recommending that we change anything about that. It's really just the intensity. That's where we're, every year the way that they can gauge and collect data, it's always improving. Just like years ago, LIDAR was the new thing. Wow, that was right after Tropical Storm Allison in 2001, and that was just cutting edge, a better way to get good contours for the area. So this is the newest way to get good intensity numbers.
I'm just glad to hear that we are joining the county in this area with other cities, because the more we bow together, the more likely we're going to be able to fix a lot of these problems as they come, because we're all on the same information. So I'm grateful for that. Does anybody have any other input? Jason?
Are we painting too broad a stroke on the sidewalks? Like I get wanting to close the loop that you would need a sidewalk on Highway 6, or I can't believe that the high school was built without sidewalks around it. But when the city built large, we didn't put sidewalks in. And there's a piece of property on Charlotte that I drive by pretty frequently that if somebody buys and wants to build, I don't know how they would be able to put a sidewalk there without covering the ditch. And that seems like an awful lot of expense to somebody building a house. So do we need to have some sort of district to cover those instances, or what are we going to do?
That's a great question. So because it's in the design criteria manual, we don't have variances, but we have a modification procedure. So if it turns out that there is no way to physically fit a sidewalk, there's just nothing that we can do, or we can't put a sidewalk in a ditch right now, then we can go through they can go through the modification procedure and say, hey, can we put it up in our property? If it's a commercial development, then a lot of times they'll just run it up on their property. Schools have done that as well. Or you know what, let's do an escrow situation so that once we've filled in, if you notice right behind City Hall, we filled in one of the ditches sort of as a pilot study. Let's see what happens if we convert that from open ditch to a storm sewer pipe so that we can. I mean, I would love to have sidewalks. We've got schools on either side, right? Of course we would. That would be great. On Lewis, on Large, all of the roads that go through there. It's not cheap. It's expensive, because it's not just the sidewalk. It's filling in the ditches and the pipes and everything else. So
That's what I'm saying is I feel like this is going to be an undue burden on somebody that is gonna develop the one piece of property on Charlotte that is undeveloped right now, while everybody else on the street already has their homes and can sell them and do whatever.
well, now in the original Manvel town site, there's still a provision there, with the asphalt roads and those kind of things. They still have that sort of out, if you will, if it's in the OMT. Again, if it doesn't make sense, if there's just no way to do it, then we have the modification procedure, which is where basically an engineer, hey, city, your minimum requirement is a 24-inch pipe for my culvert. Well, the ditch is only 1.5 feet deep. Why would I put a 2-foot diameter pipe? I can't physically fit that. Can I do 2 18 inches side by side instead? Well, yes, that's what a modification is for. So again, if common sense comes in and good engineering, just, we'd love to put a sidewalk here, but we can't for whatever reason. There are no other sidewalks, then of course we would consider that. I don't think we should specify it. Sidewalks are required along curb and gutter and open ditch. I think we just say that they're required. If there's extenuating circumstances, then we can figure it out.
The other thing is, actually, you just granted a variance to the sidewalk requirements for the piece of property that was being developed down on.
Sorry, I missed that.
Which I agree.
There you go.
I just heard Dan say that that's not an option.
Well, it can, because it's in the subdivision, it's in the subdivision ordinance.
Okay.
So it's possible to do that.
Okay.
Other input? Can somebody make a motion in a second to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Need a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor? All those opposed? 6-1. 6-0, sorry. And now, okay. Item number 3, consideration and possible action to approve Resolution 2022-4-17, a resolution of the City of Manvel, Texas, adopting a street maintenance program for the City of Manvel, providing that this resolution shall become effective from and after its passage and adoption. Somebody.
Yeah, I can kind of get started if you want to get your laptop and everything set up. Quick little history. 22 years ago, when I was working at the City of Friendswood, one of my first projects that the city manager, Ron Cox, gave to me was to develop a street maintenance program for the City of Friendswood. They'd never had one before. And typically the way that roads would get paved or potholes would get fixed, things would get done was, the greasy or the squeaky wheel gets the grease kind of thing. Or candidly, influential, whoever happened to live on that particular road. So it wasn't objective, put it that way. So he asked me to put together a street maintenance program. And so we went and looked at condition of all of the different roads. We looked at how much traffic was on all the different roads and the age of the different roads. So I had my presentation. I sat down with the city manager and the public works director at that time, who had been there for a very, very long time. And I was, young, relatively young, my 20s, very proud of this presentation that we had put together. And the public works director looked at it and he said, well, I guess y'all don't need me anymore. And he just got up and walked out of the office and he retired, like right there on the spot. He'd been there 30 some odd years. Like, well, gosh, that wasn't the intent. So I guess maybe he felt like I was, trying to get into his business. The reason I tell you that is because a lot of times in cities, when you get engineering, you get public works, and you get capital projects, if the three of those have competing interests, it can be a disaster. We don't have that. We're working together. So we sort of identified, actually, with, if Dan Davis is still, he's still here. So he was on council whenever we came up with this almost 2 years ago. Let's get this in the budget. We got it in the budget. Let's go out there and let's find a company that can help us really assess the roads objectively, because we all have our own opinions of, well, that road's really bad, well, that one's bad. But let's have a third party come in and do it objectively. And then, more importantly, once we get this report, we don't want to put it on a shelf. We want, Gilbert's guys to be able to use it. So hopefully that's enough of a kind of a lead in. Does that get you started? Perfect.
Good evening, Council. My name is Wale Taiwo. Let me apologize. Kind of under the weather, so my voice is a little hoarse. Gilbert will be assisting me later with the presentation at the later ends, but we're going to cover street maintenance and pavement preservation. During the selection, we reached out to 3 firms, Arc Engineering, Fugro, and RMT, and each of them had their advantages, disadvantages, but to tackle the few conditions that we had as a city, we really wanted to capture how the narrow roadways are also a condition that needs to be evaluated. We ended up in determination going with Fugro because they had a slew of different technologies to capture both width, pavement conditions, to capture locations, all while being in a timely manner, where Arc Engineering wanted to do manual collections, would take weeks, if not months, and RMT wanted to utilize our personnel and vehicle to collect data, which would also take a long amount of time and be inaccurate because it would be across different vehicles. So clearly our objective of interest was to highlight the narrow roadways, to also collect that data, to get the actual condition of the pavements that were being collected, have a way to display this information all together. So we wanted to use our GIS system so that we had a way to have a record, show locations, and then make updates as we make improvements, and then also get an analysis from the organization to basically help us come up with a solution to how we can, fix this and not just keep going down a dwindling trail. So they created an index for pavement condition. It's basically for them to evaluate on a scale the current conditions of our pavement. And if you see there, they have 42 being for asphalt pavement and 45 overall. That's not a true collection because they mainly focused on our asphalt roadways. There were a few connectors that were concrete, so they evaluated those as well. This is a more realistic representation of how the city wants to handle the current collected indexes. And where they gave a really, really broad variation scale, we went and focused on good, fair, and poor, which you'll see coming up in a few slides. With that, we used their rehab plan, which focused more on these 4 basic approaches on how to rehab pavements that had certain ratings with the PCI scores. As you can see, anything above 85, we weren't going to do anything as that's pretty subpar. Anything greater than 55, we will look at preventative maintenance tactics such as slurry seal. Anything greater than 40, we were looking at doing an overlay, and anything slightly over 25, we'll do a reclaim. And lastly was reconstruction. I know those terminologies might not be familiar to everyone, but I'll explain more in detail. So from a cost standpoint, you can see there is definitely a focus on preventative maintenance, as it is well cheaper than going into minor and major rehab and reconstruction. And as we're a growing city and we're bringing on new development, we're really focusing on concrete. So I didn't want that to be neglected. Even though this assessment focuses mainly on asphalt, you can see when we do transition to more and more concrete roadways, it only gets more and more expensive. And that's why the focus is to focus on the preservation. Here you can see a snippet I took. it states that every $1 spent to keep a road in good condition avoids $6 to $14 later to rebuild the same road. And I really like this representation because you can see it's not a linear regression, it's an exponential drop. So when you get past that 10-year mark of pure neglect, where you don't do anything in terms of maintenance and preservation, you really start to dwindle and lose that road. And that's why I had to highlight more on preservation than just rehab. Here, they gave their graphical representation, and as you can see, if we had, deep pockets, we could essentially just fix everything right now. That would be the purple line up top. And if you look at scenario 1, it is just essentially trying to maintain our current score and basically just trying to keep our heads above water. Whereas scenario 2 would be trying to actually improve and make an impact and improve our roadways. Where obviously the last line, where it's just linear, which is not really a true representation, it's just falling off completely until we can't keep up. So these numbers are very frightening, of course. You're talking about millions of dollars in maintenance and rehab, but of course there are other outliers that play into this. And the main thing to know is that this is a outline. This is basically steps that we can follow to actually curve the depreciating roadways. And I really want you guys to focus on maintenance and how it's important no matter which scenario we take. Another thing in scenario 2, you see a large portion of reconstruction way out in 2027. That is what they proposed because the city has a fixed budget, or we're working on a fixed budget. But again, there are certain things like partnering with the county and having additional manpower and labor that can help us curve those huge costs. So the overall network assessment, remember prior I showed you that fair, good, poor image of the red, green, and yellow. As you see, there's a lot of red roadways. And what I really wanted to even point out to you all is that the sub 10%, the sub 10 on the PCI score is gray, and those are essentially failed roadways. So basically, how are we going to mitigate and resolve this from being a point where we can't come back? And that's where preservation is a key focus. Now, we can definitely try to repair and reconstruct the failed roadways. That's an obvious, and that's what we have to focus on. But preservation is key, and by having a budget associated to preservation, we can continue to raise the PCI score, maintain these roads, get the life out of them to where it won't be a huge burden on the citizens repairing these roadways. Another thing with this preservation plan in year 1, you could see down there in the little legend, you have asphalt concrete AC, and then you have Portland cement concrete. Again, we're not really trying to focus on Portland cement concrete with this. And fortunately, I think we reached out to Meridiana. There are maintenance bonds associated with these things, and they are going to be repairing that roadway, not on the city or citizens' budget, because that's why we have staff do inspections and follow up with these things. So here you can see year 2 and 3. We also see they're focusing on, the initial rehabs, where you see a lot of 2-inch milling overlays, and then you start to see the reclaims take place. All right, and then here, which I really want to focus on because it'll transition you guys to Gilbert, you see where we start more reclaims, larger section reclaims, and reconstruction. Now, fortunately, because we have a little bit of a budget, and we have assistance from the county, we don't have to wait till year 5 to do these reconstructions. By, not to say pushing out preservation, we can still plan for preservation, but having the county's assistance, we will be able to move items from year 4 and 5 to the top of the list, because mainly having continuity is the goal. You want roads that connect to other roads, not a nice road that goes to nowhere. And with that, I want to hand over to Gilbert to go over the actual plan forward.
All right. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, Council. So Wale went over the plan and kind of the reasoning for us getting this together. And so what the whole study does is it kind of gives us a group a plan on what we can do throughout the years. In doing so and reviewing the plan, we kind of got to look at other things as well within the plans, as location, if we need to widen the street, what else needs to be done. We need to look at and evaluate such things as, is there future development that's going to go on there? You know, are the streets going to get wider? Look at the master thoroughfare plan. So looking at this study and with the ILA with the county right now, we currently got on a couple roads that are on here, and they're kind of grouped together. The PCI on some of these roads are anywhere between 22 and 51. So it's kind of on the list, you know, it's the importance on PCI and widening the road, but we also got to kind of group them together on location. Mobilization's a big charge, a big cost with projects most of the time. So if we can group those areas together with on the list from, you know, from bad to better to better to better, you know, we can stack that up and get some done in one area, then move to the next bad area and kind of connect these the way we had talked about. Right now we're striving to kind of get 26 feet, but as Dan had said a little bit earlier in the, it's kind of difficult to get that because in some of these areas we don't have the space. So we would have to fill in the ditches, do the underground and run that. So we're trying to get as much as we can with that. Some of these streets, if we do reclamation, we can widen the streets a couple feet extra, kind of like what we did back here with Large and Palmetto. We reclaimed and widened it. So the overall goal is 26 feet, but sometimes that might not be fully capable of getting that. The county helping us is a great thing as long as we get the budget for it. They can help us out, but we can also do work on the side as well in the future when we get fully, well, not fully staffed, but we can get the employees to get this done. Right now, with our schedules of everything else that we have going, it's kind of difficult to do both at once. So in the future, we'll look at getting an ILA with the city and then maybe rehabbing or milling and overlaying ourselves in-house. So there's some training that'll be going on with that. But the overall goal is to go ahead and keep, you know, getting these things done, knocking them out, and adding life to the road. We can look at different, for the roads that can be widened a little bit more, we're going to lean more towards reclamation, but there's also the slurry option as well, which, again, if the road's wide enough and we can't get any more out of it, then we'll look at that and adding life to it. So this is just pretty much a guideline for us on what we're going to follow in the next years, and then we can reevaluate annually to see what our next projects are going to be. Another thing we'll be looking at is, again, as time goes by, whenever we have rain events or something, you get more potholes. So the PCI score could end up going down on the street. It's the city's alive, basically. Streets and everything that goes on, weather, things will change. So we'll keep reviewing this and try to follow it as much as possible. But it's not cut black and white. Like, you can't just go down the list. Again, you got to look at location. You got to look at what happens throughout the year, the mobilization, traffic volume, width of the street. So that's, right now we're currently got a interlocal agreement with Brazoria County, so we're going to work on those streets. They just moved in today. That's Alabama, Cemetery, Crest Ridge, Georgia, possibly Wilson. We just got an update that the cost kind of went up on us again today, so that's we noticed probably about this year about 3 times. Usually we get it once a year, but about 3 times this year the cost of asphalt actually went up. So we want to follow this as much as we can, because the longer we wait, the higher the cost will be for the asphalt and construction in the future. As you know, fuel costs go up, and then cost of oil goes up, oil tack, oil, asphalt, everything else goes up. So we want to make sure we stay on top of it. But again, with these streets, again, the PCI level is kind of low, moderate, somewhat in these streets. So we wanted to go ahead and tackle these right here to make sure that we can at least widen them out and they're in the general area. Next year, we'll reevaluate what's there and then what's on this plan here. They actually moved in today, so hopefully they can get started. That's pretty much it. We're gonna keep following it in the future. We'll reevaluate and then bring whatever roads we can, get you guys for us to rehab in the future or mill and overlay, as well as seeing what we can do within our department and our employees to go ahead and get kind of the ILA and then our side getting some of it done.
Go ahead.
So, thanks for that. I have thank you for all that. So, Kyle, this might be directed to you and to everybody. Is this going to be some information that we're going to use when it's time to update the thoroughfare plan? And is it time to update our thoroughfare plan with this information?
Actually, the thoroughfare plan update as well as the comprehensive plan is in the approved budget, so it's planned for this year.
This year, okay.
That's the first thing. The second thing is, we have about $450,000 in the current year's budget for street repairs and reconstruction. So 450,000. There's $300,000 in one line item, and there's 150,000 in a second line item. No, we were holding it for the county, but they didn't go them until the new fiscal year. The other part of that is, if you remember back, there was a set of scenarios. Two of those scenarios had about 450,000 in the first year for scenario one, and then it jumps up to about 1.4 million, 1.5 million, about 800,000, 700,000 over the next 5 years. That's the first scenario, and that's the thing up at the top. If we're trying to increase the benefit to the citizens by increasing the condition of the roads, then obviously we're looking at a greater amount of money. After that 5 years, for scenario one, you're looking at about $5 million, about almost $9 million to improve the roads over those 5 years as well. So that's one of the things that we're going to have to look at for next year's budget is if we want to implement the plan, it's going to cost a significant amount of more money than what we have in this year's budget, to the tune of, if we go with scenario one, you're looking at tripling the amount of money that we're going to have to spend on preservation and improvement of the roads themselves.
That's fine. So we're talking about next year's budget just to add to what we have and just keep going on here depending on the scenario. So overall cost, and just because numbers aren't good for me, what are we looking at for first scenario one?
First scenario in the first year is about 450,000.
Okay,
In the second year, it's 1.4 million.
okay,
1.56 million in the third year, 830,000 in the fourth year, and 700,000 in the fifth year.
okay.
But Kyle, based on what I'm understanding in what's recommended by your professional, that's woefully underneath what they're
That is just maintaining. Again, if it's going to be more than that, you're talking more than $8 million over 5 years.
correct. So $300,000 is, that's not going to touch it. I mean, you're not, and not for nothing, but you've had this report for 22 weeks. 22 weeks. Why are we just getting it now? And you had it 10 weeks before the first budget meeting. This is something we should have talked about in budget. This is a huge deal.
There is no way that we would have been able to put another $1 million into the budget for the streets.
There's lots of ways we could have put $1 million in the
I
budget.
think what's important is that we're talking about it now. We have it, we're looking at
But
it.
let's really talk about it now. $300,000 is not, that doesn't touch it. I mean, if we're going to hire people, if we're going to hire experts to tell us what we need to do, then we need to do our best to follow their advice, not, because, I mean, for $300,000, we might as well not do it, because it's just going to rot away with what we can't just patch stuff together.
Right. Again, we have 3 years' worth of roads set up with the county to do, and we have money in the fund balance in order to do those. The problem is actually just getting the county here to do them. And now that they are, I think there's 6 roads that they have lined up to do. I don't know if they're going to do all of them at this time, but that's ready to go.
I mean, I would have felt more comfortable if you had said, we didn't spend the $300,000 last year, so we're gonna put $600,000 in the budget this year for this and reduce the fund balance by $300,000, because then at least it looks like we intend to do something. But just having $300,000, Gil's not gonna have what he needs to do his job.
That's where the budget amendment comes in. It goes back into the fund balance either way. If we come back and the county, and they can do all 6 of the roads and it costs $600,000, we'll come back to you and they have the council do a budget amendment, take it out of the fund balance and put it in there. We weren't certain, the county hadn't done any roads for us in several years. We've done the interlocal agreement every year and they've accepted it and they've approved it, but they haven't done the roads. That money's in the fund balance. It's ready to go. It's just a question of whether we can get the county here to help us.
What are our other options but for the county?
Hire,
If we
Let me
did
bail you out.
try to do it ourselves, it would be astronomical.
No, I agree.
Way much more. That's why, sorry, for the past 22 weeks, I've been reaching out to the county. We actually reached out to Precinct 4, who agreed to do it, and we getting the work done by Precinct 2. So getting commitment from the county was relatively difficult. There was a lot of communication, a lot of back and forth, a lot of unanswered emails, but we finally did get commitment.
And I want to recognize that you guys have done, and even you, Kyle, and Dan. I mean, even Kyle. I mean, you guys have done a good job in really trying to focus the county and getting that help from the county. And that I understand that makes a huge difference, so that we can reduce our costs. But at what point do we recognize we're not going to get the help from the county, and the longer we wait to do it ourselves, the more expensive it gets, and then our roads are falling apart? You know, I think we've got to find that, what is the lost opportunity cost of hanging on to the money and getting it done, to Gil's point, that, you know, how often has asphalt prices gone up, you know? And so we didn't do it now, and we didn't do it next year, and we didn't do it year after that, and now it costs us 10 times what it would have 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And moving forward as well, as far as our department, a great thing about the county, our guys helping the county during that, is they're getting some experience as well. We have a young group of guys out there, and some are still learning, some are a little bit, have some experience, but we need to get to that point. My idea in the future is for us to have this ILA, but also to have our crew running. But we need more personnel, more experienced personnel at that. So the future, getting a contractor to go out there, mill it, do the whole thing, you know, outsource it, again, like Wale said, it's going to be a very high cost. The idea is in the next few years to continue with this ILA, but also for us to be able to do it in-house. But again, that's going to take experience and knowledge. A lay-down machine isn't something that's easy, and then once you lay it down, you're stuck with it. So we want to make sure that whenever the guys are out here, they can get experience, learn from these guys in the county that are doing it, and eventually move a little bit forward with us getting it and getting experience ourselves. So that, in fact, in the future can save us some money that way, and we can knock out some things. But again, it's personnel and experience. Again, I want to stress that once we put that asphalt down, and if somebody that's not experienced is running that lay-down machine, it's not going to come out pretty. So we just got to be sure that we're responsible before we start doing those projects. But the plan is to start getting out there and getting it done without a contractor and continuing with the ILA with the county.
Yeah, and again, I want to underscore, I'm going to tell you the same thing I told Chief Trailer. It may not sound it, but I'm in your corner here. I want to make sure that we're getting you more money for the things that you need, not less.
Yes, sir.
So I have a question. The list of these roads here, this is the list that the county is doing, right? Yes. Okay. And so do we have a list of roads that we're tackling ourselves that we are within budget to do? That are not without interlocal?
These roads with just an M&S would kill the budgets, that even the savings and the rollover, it'll take all of it.
So there's not a small list. It's this list, and then we move on.
Is do this right now, which would be best.
Because I saw all the lines, and I see all of that. I'm sorry?
Could be. 1, 2, 3, 6. That's about 14,000 feet of road on these 5
that we're
5 roads.
sharing that cost with the
Right.
county because they're helping us.
We're paying for the materials,
Yeah.
and they're paying for the labor and the equipment.
Gotcha.
So you're
And so
talking
that anything else
almost
that we add to it, it's really on us to do, even if it's small repairs that need to happen. And throwing any money at it, it's not gonna help if we don't have the experience or the materials or the equipment to do it on our own.
Right. If you look at that, it's all of Cemetery from 6 all the way up to past Scott, all the way to the end. Wilson, all the way from 6 up to Lewis. Georgia, Crestridge, and Alabama are shorter streets, but it's most of those as well. So Cemetery and Wilson are going to be the 2 largest ones.
So I know this is a little bit far-seeking, but is there an option to consider COs to develop more of our program to get more of this going faster in the next 10 years? 5
Actually,
years?
on that chart, if you have enough money, you can pave every road in the city.
Yeah, and I'm not
problem
trying
is
to
it's
pay
cost.
for it, what I am trying to do is, like, as you mentioned, get ahead of it. Is that something that we would consider? Nobody likes to go into debt. Nobody likes to go pay for things that that some people feel that we don't need. But again, getting ahead of it and being a proactive city, is that something we would consider? To either, like I said, grow a department, add equipment, and add more than just what the county is helping us with, because the county is going to be tied up for a little while. And so knowing that, I'm trying to think if it's something that this council would consider for the future to acquire a large amount of debt to get ahead of it a lot quicker. Is that a possibility? Would it require a lot?
That's not a.
Well,
that's a
I'm asking you because
Definitely.
you would have to build a
You'd have to-
department.
Right.
We would have to recruit. We would have to streamline and/or research the equipment, and that's not cheap. It's very expensive. Where are we going to put it? What is it going to be? Who's going to man it in the next 3 to 5 years to say, we're doing roads?
The biggest part
that
of
a
that is
thing?
going to be the experience of the crews out doing the work. That's going to be the biggest issue. But to answer your question, if the council wants to go and consider issuing debt to pave roads, that's a council decision. And that's kind of that scenario right there. If it's an unlimited amount, you can do as many
I'm
roads as you
thinking
can.
between the purple and the green, because again, these are 5 or 6 roads. But let's say that we have a goal in the next 5 years to tackle 10 of our own, and then we catch up with the county again with the others, and at least the people will see maintaining our tax rate as best as we can, very, very low and the same. Is that a possibility that we can do? Not going unlimited, but
If the council wanted to go out and get money, either fund balance or debt, for a certain amount of roads, we would do a certain amount of roads.
just a certain amount of roads.
Whatever the amount of money that you allocated for that is how much we would do. We can come back and give you an idea, if you're looking at $5 million or $10 million or whatever amount, we could probably come up with a list of roads that would take care of.
And that would,
Oh, I'm sorry.
If I recall, it was about $35 million, is that right? $37 million, if we were to have a contractor bring all the roads up to a PCI of 100.
Okay.
Again, that would be asphalt. Some of these roads, obviously the third party, they don't know our thoroughfare plan, they're just objectively looking at the condition of the roads. Some of these roads we wouldn't want to reconstruct as asphalt because it's going to be a thoroughfare, so it would be a concrete road. Well, now that's going to be much more expensive, of course, so.
and I wouldn't
It's a large number, of course.
yeah, so 37 million, every road, asphalt, and we're done. Never, and I don't think we would entertain.
You're not done. You're back
You're not
to
done,
100%.
because then you have to do the maintenance.
Reservation.
So let's just say that we took another 10 of our most egregious roads, right? Let's just say, and then again, some of them we're not going to do because there's reasons why we're not going to do that. But it would update, in all of this, we would update equipment. We are about to build their new facility, correct? So we would have space for that. We would have a reason to recruit and hire because we have latest and greatest equipment to grow that. But we will always be a lot more ahead than everybody else if we're partnering with the county with this, and then we have our own. But jumping ahead, is it worth it for us to do $10 million in debt for this jumping ahead. Prices are going to get worse. It's not will get any cheaper. A lot of the city's going to get filled in with concrete in certain areas, depending on who buys what and what's developed. Is that something we want to see?
I appreciate the work you guys have done in the plan, and I appreciate you reminding me of our budget constraints, but respectfully, this plan doesn't go far enough. It doesn't. The plan is what it is. It doesn't go far enough. It does. If we adopt this plan alone, we're rearranging deck furniture on the Titanic.
What more would you want?
We need
Is
to
it-
find
is
ways-
this-
we need to find ways to get more money to figure out how we're gonna meet what's the word I'm looking for? Your contractor, your expert. We need to find a way to hit that target better than $300,000 a year.
But it still goes with the plan, right? If we get the money, we could still follow.
Yeah, in that respect, I'm saying that we what your vendor recommended is we need to come up with where are we going to find the money to do a better job to catch up faster than $300,000 a year to what your vendor recommended.
Gotcha. So as a project manager, my specialty is feasibility. So that's what we're looking at. And to make this even somewhat feasible, to layman's terms, you got to do it yourself. That's going to be the cheapest way. So with partnering with the county, we'll get our current employees experience and tenureship, and we can do it for a vast budget. I mean, for example, Large Avenue, that was a new construction. That was $700,000. It took 9 months, and we went with a contractor, and it looks immaculate. But then you look at 14,000 linear feet versus 2,200 linear feet, and they're essentially the same number. You will go with 1,400 versus 2,200.
So the scenario I want to avoid is that we underfund this project and a road that you might have thought needed to get done this year because it's on your list and it didn't. And then maybe it doesn't get done next year, and now we have a flooding event, and now that road is gone. And so now it's not repairable. Now we're going to spend a ton more money to completely rebuild it than if we had fixed it 2 years earlier and it could have withstood that. I'm not expecting you to answer that tonight.
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
I mean, you can't underfund nothing. right?
That's
So as long as you're doing
that's the
something,
point
you're
I'm making.
moving forward.
And I think Kyle gets that.
Yeah, one of the other parts of this is a maintenance plan. One of the things that we have to look at, if you're looking at the thoroughfare plan, you're looking at much larger, wider streets. And part of that process is going to be right-of-way acquisition. When the school district platted the CTE building or the ag barn, they dedicated right-of-way. When Manvel Meadows platted, they dedicated right-of-way. So we don't have to acquire much. There's certain places and other things. But in order to make the road go from what it is now to what it is in the thoroughfare plan, you're in many of the thoroughfares, we're going to have to acquire right-of-way. We're going to have to frontage along that in order to go from a 40 or a 60-foot road right-of-way to an 80 or 120-foot in order to comply with that. And you're talking about vastly different things. A maintenance program is maintaining. The construction, according to the thoroughfare plan, is much, much bigger. And Dan said, those aren't asphalt. Those are much bigger, much wider streets. You're not talking about a two-lane asphalt road. You may be talking about a 4-lane thoroughfare like Pollard. That's considerably different, and it's considerably more expensive. Not only in just the materials, but it also is in the right-of-way acquisition. So,
And I'll stipulate to those conditions, and I agree with Dan that the ones that are on the thoroughfare plan, they're going to cost a lot more. There's going to be a lot of headache, but let's figure out a way to do more of the low-hanging fruit.
Sure.
Lewis is in bad shape, and Charlotte is in bad shape.
Lewis is on the thoroughfare plan, and we need right-of-way for it, going all the way to McCoy.
So, and yeah, this
Some of those, but
money,
you know
I
what
think
I mean.
the plan is not money, like he said. They're telling us what we need. We're going to have to come back to the table about how to pay for this. And my view is that I just want to hope that we would consider doing it a lot quicker than waiting on the county. The county has their own issues. They're going to do the best they can. But they have a lot of roads too, so we're going to take whatever partnerships that we can get. But if we would consider some debt to move ourselves forward, to put ourselves in a better position and get that list a little bit longer. I would like this plan to stand as what we need to get forward on our thoroughfare plan that's going to get updated this year. Let's just go with this because it is our starting point. This is what it is right now. And then come back to the goal-setting sessions where we're going to reorganize our goals so that we can really dig and dive deep. What are we willing to do to get further ahead?
Right. And that's one of the things we could bring back to you as a list of, the top 10 most impactful roads.
Yeah.
It's going to be a lot more than what that cost is in order to do that, if you want to sort of front load the cost of that. And if that's what you want to do, we can come up with something and bring that back to you in a relatively short period of time.
So what we would know, what we would consider paying for. And I don't think it's a bad investment, again, because we're about to build that building anyways, to put equipment in there, to get people that are going to be working with us for the next 20, 30 years, I pray, with this type of experience to keep our people updated. And so I don't think that's a terrible way to go. But again, it's an entire council that decides that the debt is going to be worth it for the greater good of all. If you guys want to talk about it later. But for this right here, I'm okay with this study. It is an eye-opening thing. I always knew it was going to be expensive. I speak to other cities and their mayors and their council people all the time, just in general passing, and they all talk about how they're struggling with the cost. With inflation is hitting everybody, and there is nothing that's saying that it's going to get any better. So we have to do what we can to get ahead of it, and sometimes it means taking big leaps. So it's not cheaper for anybody else. It's going to be just as expensive. And Dan?
If I could just say, it gives us something that we never had before, and it's a baseline. It's an objective baseline of all of our asphalt roads in the city. So I do want to celebrate that win because we've never had that before. We did that last year with the fire hydrants, and same thing. Okay, help us focus, on it's just data right now. There's just so much to look at. So it helps us narrow that, and then in another 3 years, another 5 years or whatever, let's look at it again. Let's look at it again. See how we're progressing. So I just didn't want to let that part escape because it's unheard of, 15 years ago for Manvel to get to do something like this. So I appreciate council letting us go down this path of getting this report.
Absolutely.
It's great. I mean, we have work to do around the city, as you can see, but let's not catch up to what I've seen before in other cities. We're actually at a good spot. It is going to cost money and time. However, it's not as bad as it could be, I guess you could say. So we got a good starting point. But once we get these done, then we have maintenance and prolonging the life and things we can do. So we can get them to that point to where a few years down the road, we can crack seal and slurry and stagger the projects and then kind of smooth out the cost. So right now is going to be the kind of, let's hit it, let's do what we got to do. But after that, the maintenance and prolonging the life of the road will be beneficial and a little bit more cost effective for us.
Is it wise to put the poor, very poor, I can't read the dark red one and failed? Is it wise to lump them all together?
I think the idea is if they're poor, they're poor. If the only one that would be different, obviously, is a failed road.
And that's where I'm at. Is if we've got a failed road, then are we going to risk putting money into a poor road when we should have done one that's failed?
Yes. Again, if it's a baseline that shows what the condition of the roads are, we need to look at what the priority order in order to get them done. If we're talking about sort of jump starting a bigger grouping with using debt, then that could be something that we could look at. What you're looking at is the condition of the road and the amount of use it gets. Those are the two variables. If you get and if we're going to do those things, that's probably what would go into sort of that top grouping is which are the ones that are used the most and which are in the worst condition, or at least the connections to the ones that are used the most. That would be what we would probably bring back to you.
And I would say also, too, if we were going the route of having a contractor to do some of these roads, we got to take into consideration location of the roads and how far apart they are because mobilization is a huge cost.
Right, in light of all of this, thanks for this discussion. If everybody's okay with it, I'd like to get a motion and a second to approve this. And I want to make a note that shortly, And I mean, probably right around January as things are settled down and we're seeing what the county's doing with these roads to bring this back, possibly to make it, I'm hoping that we will make it a goal. How do we want to jump forward like this? And is this going to be something that we make a priority for budgeting next year, but in something pretty big? Not trying to, and then again, alerting the public as best as we can with what roads are being taken care of, what roads are going to be on that list, because they will want that we would want their feedback from, okay, we hear comments about roads a lot, and they need to see what it is we would be addressing so they can be behind us when we're telling them we're going to do it all possibly in one fell swoop, maybe.
And again, it's kind of telling, maintaining roads, not just constructing, but maintaining roads is
Maintaining.
expensive.
Yes, so that's what, if everybody's feeling okay with that, if I can get a motion and a second to approve this study and put it as our guideline to get going.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the study.
All those in favor? All those opposed? Thank you. Great discussion.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Go get well. Don't be sick. Okay. And so the last item, hopefully it's not long, consideration and possible action to direct staff on the following as requested by council, myself, Hayne, and Councilman Perry, on special events and a couple of code ordinances, chapter 33 and 35, which we may or may not get to. So I did bring this up. My second was Mr. Perry, and we were at TML learning some things about the legislation that's going to come down to make things harder for us. I'll say it, from the state all the way down. But it's come to excuse me, I'm losing my head here. It's come to our attention. I look at our entire city, and I look at all of our sister cities, and they are having a great old time with all of the things that are going on in their cities, yet we have nothing going on here. I'll say it, that's what it is. So I asked to look at our events policy because what I don't want to say, well, I don't want to ask why this is happening. It's very clear from some of the citizens' comments, and just because you just sort of look around and see, of why we don't have any events in our city, why it's difficult, why we don't usher it, why the city is perceived to some place that nobody wants to be because we are not welcoming. From a staff perspective, period. It is what it is. I would like to know, and what I'd like to start discussing and ask is, so I know what our policies are because we got it emailed to us. I got ordinances about food handlers and about mobile food vendors. And we also got what our regulations are, the like permit applications, and also I believe we got what our guidelines are about people that come in and do anything, to bringing in a food truck, to having a mobile food tent, to handing out tacos, to giving out hot dogs, all of these things, and what it pertains, from the fire marshals all the way to our events. And so what I'm asking, first of all, can I ask if anybody here, I know I'm not supposed to guide conversation, but Mayor's not here, I can do this today. Did y'all read it over, and did anything stand out to you concerning all that it takes to get an event going in this city? Anybody have anything to say about it? Can I start with you, Mr. Perry?
Sure. I guess for me, the most important thing, looking at all that this entails, what can we do in our review to make certain that, yes, public safety is being met and that we're meeting whatever guidelines, but also at the same time, just make it a little more user-friendly so that we can have more events and that it's not so difficult for the event planners, the vendors, what have you, to operate in our city.
That's a good start. Nicole, do you have anything to add?
I actually am an event planner. I've been doing that for about 12 years, and I attempted to host something here in the city. And I felt like the biggest hangup for me was that staff didn't know, wasn't able to give me a clear path, kind of like what you're saying, of what do I fill out, which I did fill this out, but then what happens after that? And it felt very me versus them, you know, help me. I'm trying to help bring something of quality here for people to be excited about it. Not only is that, I didn't get to host my event, which is crazy because I'm literally on council and still couldn't figure it out. But I just felt like, you know, it wasn't business friendly to have free promotion, free quality promotion. And I went away from that having to tell everyone why we couldn't have it. And I'm telling you I won't ever do it again unless this type of stuff changes. And I can't imagine, if I had a hard time doing this, someone else is definitely probably getting hung up from not only just the clear process, but just the demeanor, I guess, of the staff. You know, when I would ask questions, it was just very difficult for me to get any information out of them, just a clear path. And it makes me sad because these are really great events. Is such an easy win. City doesn't have to do anything to bring these businesses and bring these groups here to be able to showcase what we have to offer and talk really well about us. And that was just not my experience at all. So I'm really excited to talk about this and try to make that work for others. Thanks.
I think part of the issue we need to do is that we need to make these ordinances in such crystal clear, and city manager needs to make sure that his staff understands crystal clear what is done so that there are no questions. And I'm going to go back to you, Jessica, so smell the diesel. But there should not be room for interpretation by city staff. The ordinance should be clear so that you don't have to interpret anything. It should be, and I'm not putting you on the spot.
I 100%
Yes,
agree.
there should, because it's clear tonight that not two department heads are interpreting the same way, and so we need to fix that. I mean, I think maybe we should get information from the community, what they have gone through the process, what I mean, we heard your firsthand. I'd like to hear firsthand from Ms. Gonzalez and what was her experience. Not just it appeared that we couldn't ask questions, but I want to hear what hers was. And interestingly enough, Mr. White brings something up about the food establishment. I had our annual HOA meeting at the Church of the Harvest, and the pastor there was saying that they were getting questions about the food inspections and such, and why are we doing food inspections at a church that's not selling food? I mean, I don't remember seeing that in the ordinance anywhere. So we have a problem.
And I want to add to that as my opening that I said, that there's no way that there's no way that whatever the problem is, that somewhere within our pieces of paper, however it's written, that if the same vendors can go to Pearland, Alvin, and Iowa Colony, and they have stuff going on all the time. Nobody's dying of a hot dog. There is not a food truck that is blowing up anywhere. I don't care what you say. I cannot find it. I go straight to the code enforcement, Martin Vella, myself, to the county, who tells me, yeah, it's not happening everywhere. And other people, other cities. So what I'm asking today, and what I'm asking direction to give, is that we need to do one of two things. We need to match what they have, so it's very easy for our fire marshal and our code enforcement person to just go up and say, hey, this is what it is. It looks like everybody else. There's no reason for us and our guidelines, whatever the case may be, need to be so strenuous. And safety aside, I really don't want to hear this. God, no, I don't mean it that way. Don't tell me everything is about safety, because code enforcement and fire marshal, I got some good guidance about this. Their job and what it should be and how it should be written and how we should be ushering people is to keep them open, keep it safe, and keep them coming back. apparently everybody feels like they can't be open and that everything is unsafe and we don't want you back or here at all. That's how they feel. That's what they're saying. And when churches are feeling that, churches, oh my gosh, churches, when the only subdivisions can have things going on, and it's sad because Rodeo Palms had a food truck over there and they had their little national night and everything, and I guarantee nobody went over there and messed with them. But the city cannot appear as in, like, if you live in a subdivision, you have cool stuff going on because you're protected by that. But if you live anywhere else in the city and you're a business or you're this and you're trying to bring community, you have to go through all these steps. And again, I want to backtrack that. I remember, and Kyle, we had, and I talked to you because you were with me most of this time. When we brought all this up, there was a reason why we put everything in place. The food trucks, the mobile food handlers. I remember because we had small business in the audience, and we made it so strict. Remember, we didn't have a lot of public places. We didn't have places that were willing to do events like they are today because we were growing and small, and when food trucks were a thing and mobile food vendors were a thing, we made it like this because we didn't know what was coming. And so I want to take responsibility as a council and what is written here. It's not something that staff just made up. It was something the council came together with because we were trying to usher this in. At the same time, we were trying to be respectful of businesses because they had brick and mortars and we didn't want to overrun them. But now here we are today. And the reason why I'm passionate and loud about it is that, and that's funny because they always tell me they can't hear me. So I'm yelling this time. I'm passionate about it now because as I was hearing these grumblings, especially with events and churches and people who are trying to be a part of us here, I always believed that it was going to resolve itself. I did. Like, you know what? We just have to get it on paper. Staff is just going to be aware. But now it's again, I'm passionate about it because you're looking around at all of these cities and everybody's doing something but us. And I mean everybody. And they're looking at us like we're just hateful people. And it comes from the front desk. I mean, whoever it is at the fest, and I'm not going to presume to know, at that window, I'd like to apply for a permit to get a special event. I don't know what you're talking about. No, I don't know. Well, you got to do this, and you got to wait for that. And no, you don't have to pay now. You could pay later, or we'll approve it like 24 hours before the event. Or maybe we're going to show up and shut you down on my day off because I don't like what I see. That is not lies. This is not rumor. That is how they treat people. And I have to direct it to you because you are their boss.
That's my responsibility.
And at the same time, we have to find some community-mindedness when it comes to policing. And I would like to start with how it's written. And if it means we have to rewrite it, which I believe that's probably where we're going, to just say, we're going to loosen this stuff up. State law, safety, all that stuff, fine. I totally read through all of that. I think that's what everybody follows when it comes to that. But shutting down a vendor for not having a $300 fire extinguisher, not cool. I don't know anybody who does that. Going to a church and say that I'm going to fine you for handing out donuts, not cool. Not allowing them to have, their spaghetti dinners because that's what they do for their staff or potluck and say, no, I don't want anything like that. It's just not cool. We look terrible. We look awful. And I have to say this out loud because I think I've had it. I'm all the way up to here. And so you guys know how passionate I am about this and how passionate the community is going to be about this, and that these particular positions need some guidance and leadership because otherwise it's not going to work out on that we expect for these things to move forward like everybody else. It's not hard anywhere. It is not hard. And nobody can sit here and tell me that we got all these things and safety and staffing. No. Everybody else does it. There's no reason why we cannot. So one of the things I want to ask for council, after I said all that, is if we could please consolidate this and make it friendly to what Alvin does, to what Pearland does, to what Iowa Colony does, to what Friendswood does. Is there something that we're missing that they allow that we could do better to write it, whether it be one application or two, smaller events, big events? I get a lot of pushback about the mobile food unit. Does everybody know what that is? It's like when you have a tent and you give out a taco or something like that. Like a tent, a cooked good, handing it out on a plate, big deal. Apparently you're not supposed to do it in this city. I'm sure there's reasons why. Again, every other city does it. I don't understand why we are the ones that say, no, you cannot. number one. And two, I would like to revisit our food truck sign up, permits, all of that stuff, because what we're also finding is that people are trying to do business here, and although we have revised our permits over and over about, how to review inspect the truck and sign up for a year, prorate it for a year, get that. I'm going to ask, and this is a big ask, we just eliminate that altogether, because people want to come here. There's no reason why Keating cannot have 15 food trucks if they don't want to, as long as they're inspected by the county or a county. And that, code enforcement or fire marshal calls and says, oh yeah, that's an inspector truck. Because those people are trying to come here not only to create community, but possibly land here. We have all this retail coming up. Maybe they want to land here, and we're prohibiting them, and they're going to our sister cities to do business and grab people together. I know why we did it then. We did it because, again, protection for the small business. But now the small business is suffering. They want to do something a little bit more. Weeklies can't even get a couple of trucks in there, even if they wanted to, because we just have a very cumbersome process. So those are the two things. Forgive me for grandstanding and lecturing. I'm not trying to, but I am. Sorry. I'm not sorry. I want to get it clear to us that we have to address a problem that is, I feel, could be very easily addressed, but that the people that work for this city need to understand that us as a council, we love our people, we love our community, we will create this community, and we have great staff that's going to help us to do that. We're giving you direction if you could please do that. But that's what it comes down to is I need some solutions as to what to get rid of and to make it match our sisters' cities so that we can move forward with life. So, Jason, do you have some input?
Yeah, and this is gonna sound harsh, but we need to own this. We have some not so great staff, clearly, and that needs to be addressed. And the irony in my motivational speaking today, we are not being of service. We are not being of service to our community. There are plenty of people that came and told us that today. We need to be of service to the community. And I don't know that I don't recall that we've significantly overhauled the food truck ordinance, but I mean, we hastily put it together when we first put it together, and I think that we've done it a disservice by letting it sit and hoping that it would work out. I mean, and I almost want to say we should suspend it until we can figure our crap out, but I don't know that that's the safest thing to do.
Well, the only thing, after reading it and looking this over and just want to see what y'all's input is for it, is that we have a very limited amount of people that can work for our city because of how it's written. Because we thought that, like you said, I mean, I'm owning that too, because we together, you were with me, Larry, I think, and Jerome, we were all together when we wrote this, because again, there was no places for food trucks to be. We didn't want them on city streets. We still don't want them, parking everywhere, doing wherever and setting up shop on. We still don't want that. However, the fact that our list is small and people come in and they may or may not pass inspection apparently here, and they may or may not get any business here after paying their fee to be on our list that we have, but it's small. They either are overbooked, overextended, they can't always be available. So when you have large events trying to come in here, or people, I'll give you an example. Let's just say a company wants to, and somebody gave me this is a great example. If some company wants to come in and they want to give snow cones to their people for the afternoon, but the only one we have is Raleigh's on our list, and Raleigh's is not there, they can't even call anybody else. But if an inspected food truck or another ice cream place that happens to be around and available comes from North Houston and they have a Harris County inspection sticker that's not expired, there's no reason for them to not come all the way down to Manvel and say, well, great, at least I got some business here. So we have to open that. So that's really what I'm asking to look at, is that we suspend that we are going to permit them at all. We already have a piece of paper that says, I'm going to get a food truck next Tuesday at 3 o'clock because my employees are going to get hot dogs for that day. And as long as they're letting somebody know and they tell them who the food truck person's going to be, and fire marshal or code enforcement says, okay, yeah, I've verified, they're good. And if they want to pop in, great. Okay, making sure all that looks good. That's how life should go. That's just for something simple. So I can imagine if somebody like Miss Tyson, who's trying to put up 150 tents and everybody wants to give away a brownie, and then she can't do that. So in our city, because of how it's written, and so she moves her entire event to Friendswood. Sorry to call you out. All of that community in New Hope Church in Manvel, the largest church that we have, goes to Friendswood because our papers are what they are, and because everything is not only convoluted, but no, the answer is no.
Well,
Can't
not
do
for
it.
nothing, they had to come in and fill out paper instead of doing it online.
Well, I guess. Well, she didn't.
I-
So I'm saying that's just one of the things, the food truck thing. The mobile vendors that maybe we should perhaps consider that we need to, I don't know, rework, get rid of. I'm not sure. I'm probably being hasty about that safety thing. But definitely our process, who is managing our process, making sure that it gets through a lot more efficiently, speaking with our staff and making sure that the goal is, and these things we should not hear from our own ears, that yes, we'll get it done. Yes, we will get it there. Sure, let's find a way. Let's keep them here. Let's keep them open. Let's keep them coming back. Let's keep them safe. And again, putting us on the map, and that's what we believed we were doing, and it's just not working.
So to your point, I would like to hear, and it's not going to happen tonight. I think we need to kick this, but I would like to hear from the fire marshal's office and from the police chief and either the police chief, either code enforcement through the police chief or the police chief, what challenges they would foresee if we were to say that if you didn't have a Manvel permit, but you had a Brazoria County or a Harris County or a fill in the blank permit, that we would accept that, then what inspection challenges would they have to make sure that that truck was being safe while they were here? If we forgo, I mean, that would be to me the easiest way to make this easier, to say, okay, are you already certified with Brazoria County, already certified with Missouri City, blah, 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 great. Then they're on our list of whatever, and then what does the fire marshal think his challenge is going to be able to check them off to make sure that they're working the same way? I mean, I'd like to hear from them on that. I don't think he's prepared tonight to answer that.
You hear our woes, and you hear us like you don't mind.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak about this a little bit. So to answer your question directly, what type of reservations would I have, or what type of challenges in regards to taking it in from another jurisdiction, you would have to look at and see what exactly on their inspection form they're actually looking at. But if they're just covering the basics that we're talking about for basic fire protection, then yes, that's an easy fix that we can actually look at. So if it's going to be something that might be recommended that we're looking at taking it on from a current inspection from another jurisdiction, then maybe we could look at getting the paperwork from that particular mobile food vendor or mobile food truck and have them present that to us as part of that. Say, yes, I got this from insert jurisdiction here. We go out, do a spot check of their truck just to verify. So if it's just an issue that we're looking more at fire protection or fire safety, that can be something that we can discuss if we want to look at streamlining. But I would like to make another comment is this process does need to be streamlined. I do have looked at that when I first started. That was one of the things I did look at. But some of the other things that I'm looking at as well, more on our brick and mortar side, have presented a greater challenge. And it's only been here recently that we've even seen some of these events come to us. Just here recently, the weather's gotten better. As I like to say, we're not living next door to the sun right now anymore, so the weather is more conducive to have these type of events. So coming from where I was at previously, we did do an immense amount of events, and those things were worked through multiple departments throughout the city. But there was that, we want you to come here, we want you to have your events, we want you to bring in those additional people that you're trying to get here. We just want you to do it safely. We're going to work with you. We're going to figure out a way to get you there if it is something that you need. And since I've been here, I've done that with a couple of the food vendors that have come in. In fact, last week I worked with one and allowed them an opportunity to be able to get what they needed so they could pass their inspection without having to leave.
And I'd also like to add, unless something has changed, you are still a department of one.
Yes, that is correct.
So be careful what you wish for. This is one man who's doing the job of, what, 3 that we had in the department or have budgeted in the department? So 2, and is even 2 enough if we open these floodgates? This guy hasn't technically been off the job since we hired him.
I can appreciate that. But in the time that he's been here, our events are moving away.
No, I agree. And I'm not disagreeing that we need to do these things. What I'm saying is the next bottleneck is going to be he is only one guy. So we're going to have to solve that problem too.
Yeah, and that's a problem that can solve because we're always opening the doors for new hires. Always telling this man, hire, all the time. Building a new building because we don't have enough space because we're always telling people to hire. But my goal is, and what I'd like to stay on, is I know you have a lot of job with other brick and mortars and restaurants and all of that stuff, but in this particular subject, that is very passionate and important to a lot of us here. I appreciate to know that you're working with them, and I hope that is the spirit, like a good spirit to hear from the community. And what they're saying out of their heart and what they know to be true because these are their experiences. So that, I would hope that you keep that spirit of that. Because that's, anyways. So that right there, the food truck, that I think is going to help out a lot of events to like, I'm doing this event, I'm gonna bring who I want. That's, I mean, as long as they, again, I'm not looking to put them on every street corner. I'm not looking to let them go and be at Croy Park for 8 hours a day, every 12 every day. I'm looking for people who are trying to bring community here and gatherings here to have access to the things that they need to make their stuff successful without so much interference from us because we don't like that the temperature of cheese is not right for 2 hours. And I know that might be a history, but I heard that. I actually heard that. I changed out cheese. They came and they looked at my cheese, and I told them I just changed out the cheese 30 minutes ago, and they were about to shut me down because my cheese did not have 30 minutes to. They didn't hear it. No, I'm going to shut you down. No, that's it. Right now. It's that type of, I'm trying to get you to understand, because you're probably out there, that this is what we're hearing to be true. Not rumors, from mouth, from people telling me that there is no give. There is no give. The answer is, I could shut you down. That is what is coming out of people's mouths from the city to these people. And it's from an event that wants to give out a hot dog, and that's what I'm focusing on. That's what they're getting. And I want to say that it's up to the management all the way down to perceive to you, other than my being I'm not irate, I'm passionate. So somebody told me that I'm not being
You're
angry.
both, but what's next? What do we need to do next?
No. I know to be so.
I just want to say one thing to tag on to that. Just speaking from the planning part, I don't have any problem with compliance. I do work at the church, so we have Pearland, Webster, Friendswood, Alvin, and Manvel. We host events in all areas. Manvel's the only one that I have trouble with, and it's all, I'm going to say it, it all stems from the attitude I get. Everyone else is, so I don't have a problem with compliance. I actually want to bring my best event forward. I want everyone to stay safe. It would be to my detriment to get people sick or to not have a quality event. It's always it's how I have an interaction with someone. It's how I'm told information. It's how I feel when I leave that that the city does not want us to host anything here. And just like she said about shutting us down real quick. We even had someone say, or code enforcement say, that even if we had handed out an unwrapped piece of bubble gum, we would be, again, out of compliance. And just that, think it, don't say it, but also why? And no one can tell me anything or give me any good reasons behind it. So compliance is not really, even when we did go to Friendswood, like the event that she referenced, they had a long list of things that I had to do. In fact, I got denied 3 times, and that was fine because every single time it was how I was approached and how I was given that to remediate it as to why I will continue to do events there.
In all of this, thank bringing in what you, so that I'm not the only one thinking this is I like to give direction. We need this to be streamlined immediately, please. And we want it to match our sister cities so that we can comfortably do events and it's very easy to deal with so that we could be welcoming. And if it is a staffing issue, I'm gonna put that off to staff. I'll say it, if it is a staffing issue, if somebody doesn't wanna be here and they don't really care about how we do community here, you guys decide whether that is gonna happen. I'm gonna be flat out honest, because that hurts my heart to hear that. But you decide that, you know. We're just telling you what's happening and so are these people. But first things first, if we could please streamline that, make it easy, make it look like everybody else. I don't wanna reinvent the wheel, everybody else is already doing this. And number two, I would like to talk about the food handlers and the mobile food vendors and possibly just deregulation is the wrong thing about food trucks. There are a lot of people that want to be here and want to be welcoming to them, and if it means that we accept no permits and inspections from Harris, Brazoria, Fort Bend, and Galveston, which is where they're willing to come here to us, and we accept that inspection, and just like the fire marshal said, it's safe, it's good, I can verify it, it's not out of date. We're gonna have so many people just knocking at our door saying, let us do your event, let us hand out your snow cone, let us give you tacos, let's go.
But that, to my point, I would rather that we not say today, though, that list or even the list that I gave, I would like them to look at what the requirements are in those cities and say, yeah, I can live with that. Because Galveston may say that, you know, they don't have to do this, this, or this, and your fire marshal may say, yeah, that shit's gonna blow up. You know, and so let's make sure that whatever municipality we're going to take.
Let's go back to the table on some of these things, because I know I'm being hasty. However, when was the last time a food truck blew up in any of our other events in the last year?
One blew up several years ago in Houston.
Okay, but not in the last year in Alvin, in Iowa Colony, or in
Agreed.
Pearland.
Agreed.
Okay, when was the last time somebody came to us and was in the emergency room sick from a taco? Like sick, like they're dying, and we're suing somebody.
Look, I ate plenty of warm mayonnaise potato salad at church events and didn't get sick. I get that, but there's a fine line between reckless and doing the right thing, and we want to be welcoming, but we want to do the right thing.
I know to go with that.
Okay,
Absolutely.
okay.
So I'm asking for consensus. If you are all in with
I need a
me
pill.
on this, to do that, to adjust it, bring it back. I'd love to see it sooner rather than later. I want us to match our cities. That's the goal, not reinvent the wheel. Let's revisit this food truck thing. Let's see if we match anywhere close. And although I know, and I know that some people don't like it, and maybe you guys don't like it, and I can appreciate that, but that little bit of income that we get from not permitting, it alleviates what they have to do. And they can move on from all of that. And I've got to look and make sure that the sign is right inside there. It's a few dollars, I understand, but I think it might be worth it.
Do we collect a fee for that sign?
I would love to, you know, there were a few people that spoke about the nonprofits. I mean, being that I'm a part of one too, I would like to kind of get clarity on that too, maybe not tonight, but just on, you know, those are community entities that promote what I feel like we're wanting here, and they are being, you know, they're having a really hard time being able to just maybe conduct ministry in the way that they feel because of an ordinance, which is crazy. So I would love to hear more on that too, eventually.
I would hope that for many years, if I'm not mistaken, we haven't had code enforcement problems. I mean, I know one that we have, and that was a very big safety issue that we had a bad experience with the church. You remember that? It was terrible.
Well,
Yes, you do. Aldo Overflow Church. That was terrible. Okay, so we did not have a good experience there. However, in all these years that we've been here, in all of these other big churches, have we ever had code enforcement come in and conduct themselves like that you know of? You've been here for 9 years. Think about how long, think about how long the Church on Masters Road, the New Hope, Church on the Harvest, and all the little potlucks and little things that they do. Have you ever heard of code enforcement, our code enforcement, go in and really make a big deal about what they do, and in your experience for those entities.
I don't know specifically about that. The attitude is something that's I'm responsible for, and the staff, we're going to solve that problem. Streamlining, matching the neighboring cities, all of those things, we will bring those back to you as soon as we can. But attitude is going to be one of the things that I will solve. You're not going to have to do anything with that anymore. Okay, I'll just leave it at that. There is lots here that I've taken notes. And the staff will talk about all these things and bring you back something that will begin to address what you have provided in the way of feedback.
Can I address that? It was a newly person that wanted to build a home here. They say they came in to get some the steps to go and get a permit to build a home. And it was a lady, and she said she came in and she asked questions. Really, she didn't know the questions to ask. So she really felt outdone. And not knowing what to ask, she thought that the person that she was dealing with could help her. She didn't get any help. I don't even know if she still has the land, but I don't know if she still want to build a house. And that hasn't been 3 months ago. So that'll go along with the attitude, and because someone probably needed to help her walk along, or maybe they didn't know that it was a person working here. I don't know exactly who it was, but I'm just telling you her experience, and she had relayed that to me. So that's part of it, and maybe they're not well educated to what they need to do, or maybe they were not feeling open enough to, and that has to do with attitude.
And rules are important, but I've said this repeatedly, and thank you for taking ownership, but I'm gonna hold you to that, because you've got some sticks on your heels that you like to dig into sometimes. So let's remember, let's find ways to say yes. Let's, I have been for 6 months trying to revalidate my Medicaid application with Fort Bend County. It has never taken that long. I have yet to been able to talk to somebody to get the right answers, and it's infuriating, absolutely infuriating. And I finally today was able to talk to somebody who showed me what I needed to fix and do and gave me the right answers, and not oh, you need to go to the state to do, or you need to go to the county to do this. I'm like, no, that's not the state law. You don't go to the county. They had no idea what they were talking about. Absolutely none. So fix it. Find ways to say yes.
I will proactively, Kyle, put it back on the agenda in the next few weeks, just so we can just make sure that it's addressed in some way. I really want to be ready for the season that's coming, and I want us to be, and again, anything that we need to do as a council, and I feel like I'm speaking for us as a group, that if you need anything else that you think we're going to need to get it done, always happy to do that. We just, and community is important to us, and keeping us going is important to all of us. And it's a complete eyesore that we are so dark in this city, and everybody else is having a great time, and everybody's leaving to go have a great time elsewhere. I do not want that to be us anymore. Please.
So Kyle's going to give us an update. I would like to move to table number 4.
Table? Can I get a second for a table?
I'll second it.
All those in favor? All those opposed? Thank you. So, and finally, any other comments? I think I've talked us to death. Mayor's not here, but any other comments? Okay, well, does anybody want to make a motion to adjourn? All those in favor? All those opposed? Thank you, and the meeting's adjourned.